Hey everyone, John here with Photography Life, and today we're going to talk about the spot removal tool in Lightroom. Now this is one of those tools that people have a love-hate relationship with. They love it because it's so convenient and it's really easily accessible while you're editing photos in Lightroom, but they hate it because there's a tool in Photoshop that does the same thing, only a lot better. So let's go ahead and dive in and see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to show you where you can find it. I'm going to show you when you might want to use it and sometimes where it doesn't work so well and you'll want to not use it. So let's jump into Lightroom here. You can see over with these other tools here under the histogram, it's going to be this one that's second from the left, and it's called spot removal. The keyboard shortcut for it is Q, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Q and we'll go right into that. And you can see we have a few different options here. We have either a clone option or a heal option, and I'll get back to those in just a little bit here. We have a size, and you can see my brush over here. When I adjust the size, it gets either smaller or bigger. That's pretty obvious. The feather right now is set to 0. If I move that, you can see the inside circle shrinking, which basically will allow the change rate, how quickly it changes from the area that's healed to the area that's not healed to be more or less gradual. And then we have the opacity, and that basically just lets, it determines how much of the background or what you are healing over is going to show through. So I'll demonstrate how each of those work, but let's start out looking at this particular image. Now you can see here we have some dust spots in the sky, and this is one of the main times you'll use this spot removal tool, is to take out little things like this. You'll also use it on people if they have a little blemish, or just to remove distracting elements from your photos that you don't want to show up in the final image. So to use it, it's really easy, and I'm going to go over and adjust these settings. I typically leave my feather set pretty low, typically right at 0, and the opacity at 100, and I'll show you why. To use this, all you do is you go in here and you can change the brush size either by using this slider, or if you're using a Mac or any other kind of a trackpad, you can usually use 2 fingers and slide up and down, and that will adjust the brush size. You can also use the bracket keys on your keyboard, and that will kind of just cycle through different sizes. So I use the 2-finger slide method, and I can dial right into the size I need. I have my little place here that I want to heal, my spot that I want to remove, and if you just click on it, what it does is it guesses a spot that it thinks is going to, that it samples from, and basically right now we're healing. So it's going to take information from this spot here, lay it over this spot here, and what happens is the spot goes away. So that's when you heal. If you clone instead of healing, then you are going to get an exact copy of this information put on top here. Now in a solid blue sky like this, it's probably not going to make a huge difference whether you clone or you heal. I will say if it's sampled from up here instead, you can see how out of place that color is. It does not match properly. Whereas if I healed, then it's going to say, okay, I know this is a lighter color of blue than up here. It's going to adjust it, and so that's why I typically stay in heal versus clone. Clone is very tough to get an exact match. The heal does a much better job at approximating what the final image should look like, and you end up with something that matches like this. It's pretty much seamless. If I get out of this tool, then you can see, even if I zoom in, you can't even tell where the healing was made, and we have gotten rid of that small spot. So let's jump in and take care of a few of these other ones. I sometimes also like to zoom in, and that'll let you be more precise. I'm going to go ahead and hit Q, and you don't have to do a big circle like this. You can also shrink it down, and instead of just doing one spot, you can drag over it and trace an outline of the shape, and that will go ahead and heal as well, or it'll remove that spot there. Now while we're looking at it, let's go ahead and see what these other sliders do. If I drop the opacity some, then you'll see that background starts to come through just a little bit, and if I go down to 0 opacity, obviously, or 1 I guess, then obviously it's still it's very visible. But I keep it up at 100 pretty much all the time. I don't want that background showing through. I'm trying to get rid of it and not just partly get rid of it. Now when we have a nice blue sky like this that's solid colored, it's very easy to find a sample area that'll quickly and easily remove a spot. But what happens when your scene's a little more complex? What happens when it's, say, a person and you're trying to heal a blemish on someone's skin, which is another very common use for this tool? Well, let's go ahead and show you, but before I do that, I do want to point out that while I'm using this tool, if I use the arrow keys to move to my next image, that doesn't change my next image. You can see here, this is going to move as I use the arrow keys, so it makes these small adjustments to the part of the image that's getting healed or getting the spot removed. So before I move to my next image, I have to go ahead and press enter to accept those changes, and then if I press the right arrow, then I can move into the next image here. Another thing is the zoom in, zoom out by just clicking on the image doesn't work because right now I'm healing. So in order to do that, if I'm zoomed in like this and I want to stay in the tool, if I hold down the space bar, you'll see now I can move my image around if I want to. I can also just click and zoom in and out, and as soon as I let go of the space bar, then I'm back into this healing tool. Now this is an image I took of my wife over in Chinatown in San Francisco one day, and it's, you know, just a quick snapshot. We were out having a good time. I was testing this camera out and just wanted to see how it performed in the shade. But for the purpose of this particular video, I want to zoom in on her forehead here, and she has this tiny little blemish here, and this is a great tool for removing something like this really quickly within Lightroom. Like I said, Photoshop has much more powerful tools that can do this, but sometimes for something like this, I don't want to jump out into Photoshop. I want to stay in Lightroom, just make a quick little adjustment, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So here I can go ahead and drop my brush size or my circle size fairly small. Just click on that, and Lightroom is going to guess, you know, part of her forehead here that it's going to sample from and heal this area. Now that didn't work too bad, but you can see she kind of has this line across here. So I can actually click this and move it to an area that matches just a little bit better. I can do over there. I can come over here if I want to. And once I do that, if I hit enter, and sometimes it's even hard to see how it looks with this circle still on it, so you can get out of the tool if you want to. And that basically disappeared. You can't tell anything was there. It completely removed it, made it look better. It wasn't very visible in the first place, but now it's completely gone. I don't have to worry about it. Now the one area where this tool really fails is if I was going to try and remove like these stray hairs here, and I'm going to show you how that works. Sometimes for small things like this, it's easier to zoom in even more, so I'm going to go 3:1. I'm going to zoom or scroll up here to this hair and hit Q, and let's see if we can brush out some of these hairs here. So I'm just going to click and drag along here, and let's see what happens if I just try and get rid of this one hair. Well, it's got a sample from somewhere, and you can see it brought some other hairs over here. So maybe what if I drag it down here and to an area where there is no hair, and go ahead and hit Q. Well, that did a pretty good job there. Let's go ahead and start cleaning up these other ones and see what happens. So I'm going to click and drag along here. Let's see if we can get rid of some of these. Again, I'm going to hit Q just to see what's happening. And this is actually doing a pretty decent job. The trick is you start getting these intersection points like here, where you have to start getting back up into her hairline where there's more hair. And eventually you start running into issues where the hair kind of starts to overlap and there's not really a clean cutoff point. In Photoshop, this is really easy to fix. It's a whole lot easier than in here. In Lightroom, if I keep doing this, and one other thing to note, this particular tool slows down Lightroom a lot. It really can drag things to a crawl if you have a bunch of different adjustments you're doing. If you had flyaway hairs, if you had a bunch of these small spots that you're removing, it can slow Lightroom down a lot. So I suggest doing this as the very last step in your editing process. Otherwise, all of your other adjustments are just going to be a lot more time consuming because Lightroom has all these changes that were made that it's still working with, and it can really get bogged down. So for this particular image, this actually worked okay. I mean, it's not the prettiest repair job I've got going on here, but you know, it's not too bad. I've had a lot worse luck with other images. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I would suggest, if you are competent in Photoshop, always use Photoshop for something like this, for you know, cleaning up hairs. But in a pinch, if you have to, Lightroom can do a decent job. But again, it's not really recommended. So I'm going to zoom out again here, and I'm going to show you one more thing. For me, this manhole cover over here is kind of distracting, and you can also use the spot removal tool to go ahead and take care of that. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm just going to make a big circle here, click right there, and you can see what happened. It sampled really close to her jacket, and we got this crazy thing going on here. So it doesn't always sample perfectly. Sometimes it picks a wrong place, sometimes it does something like this. That's really easy to fix. You can just click and drag it off of her jacket there, and it's going to clean that up a lot. But look what's happening here. We have this kind of weird halo on the edge, and sometimes you'll get that and you might not know what's going on. Well, I'll tell you exactly what's going on in this particular situation. Now, I've cropped this photo. If I hit R, you can see there's still more of this manhole cover over here. And so what's happening is it's trying to blend this section that's in the image to a section that's not visible in the image, but the information is still there. So we get this weird kind of light thing going on where it's trying to blend information that you can't even see in this image. So if you ever get that happening, oops, we don't want to crop some more, we want to heal some more. If you click on the edge of the area that you've healed, you can change the size and shape of this circle, or at least the size of this circle. But look what happens if it gets over into her jacket a bit more. We get this really crazy green flare thing going on. And if I shrink it too small, then it's going to make this manhole cover a lot more apparent. So this is kind of one of those tricky situations where maybe we move this a bit more, maybe we grow this a little bit, and even if we move this in a little, then that's starting to look a whole lot better. Sometimes you just have to play with it a little bit and you can get it to work. Other times it might not work and you're out of luck. If you ever do run into that, what I would suggest doing is go ahead and look at the full image. Don't worry about the crop, and then go ahead and remove that spot so you don't have any of that weird overlap going on, and then you can go ahead and crop the image again without having to worry about any of that overlap going on. And there you go. We remove the manhole cover. If I go back here in our history, you can see, or actually what I'm going to do is just delete this. You can see shows up, undo that, and it goes away again. This isn't the best job because you can see this line is overlapping here, so I can move this over just a little bit. And you know, I could spend a lot more time on this trying to make it perfect, but that gives you a pretty good idea of what you can use this for. Now I've got one last image I want to show you, and this is just some birds on the beach, and I want to show you where you might want to play with the opacity and the feather just a little bit. Up to now I've been using it with 0 feather and 100% opacity, so it's been there's been no transparency to it. But let's say I wanted to come in here, and I'm going to zoom in here, so I'm going to hold the space bar and click. And let's say maybe I want to get rid of this bird. I don't like the way it looks. I think it throws off the balance, whatever the case may be. Just for this particular example, I want to get rid of this bird. And let's really change things up. I'm going to say clone, and let's just see what happens. Now when you're zoomed in and you do this, a lot of times it'll sample from an area that's outside of the frame. So if that happens, you can hit the space bar, hold it down and click, and you'll zoom out again. And you can see when you clone from an area, it's really, really tough to get the color and everything to match. And especially in this particular example, there's a pattern happening. So heal is pretty much what I always stick with. I said that before and I'll say it again. So when I heal, if I go ahead and hit Q, you can see that did a pretty good job, but we still have this like solid line here between these waves over here and lack of them here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go ahead, and you can also, if you don't want to see this tool overlay, you can go down here and turn it to never. And so then pretty much it's hard to tell where you're working, but it kind of gets rid of that line if you want to see how this transition looks. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust the feather. And if I move that up, then you can see it kind of gets rid of that harsh line that was between the area that didn't get healed and the area that did. But as I adjust the feather, then part of the bird is going to reappear as well. So you can see up here a little bit of the bird showed up. So I'm going to go back here, turn my tool back to auto. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this out just a little bit so that we can get rid of that portion of the bird that started to show up. And I also want to make sure it's not importing or sampling data from over here. That wasn't the case. It was purely the feathered area was revealing part of the bird underneath here. So that actually looks pretty good. If I hit enter and I hit Q, then we kind of we lost that harsh transition between the outside and the inside. It's not completely invisible, but it's a lot better than it was when we had zero feather. And if you zoom out, then you really never even know that bird was there. So that's another trick that you can use. If you do have those harsh transition lines, you can add some feather and it will help a lot. Now there's one last thing I want to point out, and that is, let's go ahead and zoom in here again, and let's say I just want to remove part of this line here. So if I hit Q, I shrink this down some, and let's just drag it along a portion of this. If I wanted to remove this and I said, oh, I wanted to keep on going here, I can't extend this. I'm going to go ahead and turn this back to always. I can't extend this out. I can move it, but I can't change the shape of this once I've drawn it in. With a circle, I can always go in and change the radius or the diameter of it, but with a line like this, I can't add to it. Basically, I can overlap it, but I can't add to what I've already drawn. So that's one of the drawbacks, is if you mess up on the size, you have to go and delete it and start over. So if you're doing this area and then you say, oh, I wanted to grow or expand it out to include this, you can't just do that. You can't add to the existing one, so you'd have to draw a bigger area and make sure you included that in there as well. So keep that in mind. It's kind of one of the limitations that you'll find yourself running up against fairly often if you don't just do circles. But as soon as you know how to use it and what's going on, you can quickly figure out what's going to work best for you, what's going to work best for your image, and if worst comes to worst, you just delete it and start over. Well, I hope that gave you a good idea of what the spot removal tool is in Lightroom and how you use it. It's one of those things, like I said, you'll find yourself using it fairly often, whether you shoot landscapes and have dust on your sensor that you need to remove, whether you photograph people and need to clean up a few stray hairs or blemishes, or whether you shoot anything else and just want to remove little spots, clean things up a little bit, or even completely take something out of an image. It's something that is in Lightroom. You should know how to use it. You should know it's there. If you find yourself doing it a lot, I highly suggest using Photoshop instead of Lightroom, but the Lightroom one works great in a pinch. So, hope you found this useful. Please head on over to photographylife.com for more photography tricks and tips, and subscribe to our channel if you found this useful. We'll keep you up to date on upcoming videos, and have a great day.